I think the term is called survivor's remorse, where you're happy that you made it out, but you feel guilty because you're leaving people behind that have to suffer and there's nothing that you can do about it. And it's heartbreaking. No one deserves to die in prison from COVID when there is an order from the Attorney General that says if you are a low level minimum offender that you could be transferred to home confinement. So it makes no sense whatsoever for this not to have been done for everyone. I don't understand why it wasn't. My name is Chalana McFarland. I'm 52 years old. I was raised in the small town of Valdosta, Georgia. I have one daughter who is a sophomore in college. I was an attorney in Atlanta prior to my incarceration. And in 2005, I was convicted of mortgage fraud and I was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison as a first time nonviolent offender. We would congregate in the TV room and watch the briefing every day that President Trump would do with Dr. Fauci and the other medical experts. And the CDC started to publicize who made up the class of vulnerable people that were most susceptible to the coronavirus. It's people that have respiratory issues, or like myself with asthma, if you had high blood pressure, if you had heart problems, if you were obese. There were all these contributing factors. And then we found out that it disproportionately affects African Americans over others. And so when I realized that I had 5 of the conditions, I really began to panic and think, oh my goodness, if this gets in here, I may not live to make it home. The Federal Bureau of Prisons put us on a national lockdown starting in April, where we no longer went to work. We were no longer allowed to go to the dining hall to eat. And around the end of April, beginning of May, they issued us masks and told us that it was mandatory that we wear those anytime we left our cubicle. We also began to wash our hands a whole lot. And what they were doing was putting a bar of soap at each sink and asking everyone to wash their hands with 1 bar of soap. I personally spoke to the medical department and said, is this practicing universal precautions by asking 135 women to wash their hands with a bar of soap? After we made several complaints, finally they came and they installed soap dispensers with an antibacterial soap. There began to be staffing shortages. The staff was not coming to work. And we began to hear rumors that there were certain staff members that were ill. They began to test the staff members before they came to work each day. They would take their temperatures, and if they were running a fever, they were turned around. However, despite those precautions, it did not prevent those that were asymptomatic from entering the institution and possibly spreading the virus. We were just so frightened. The staff, their solution was stop watching TV. You're putting yourself into a panic. It's not that big of a deal. It just becomes tense because you're suffering from cabin fever. You can't go outside. You have no fresh air. People are just irritated. When you live communally, it's difficult anyway. Just imagine having to share a room with 134 other people. It's hard on a good day. When I first heard that I was on the list to be considered for home confinement, there was a feeling of surrealness that, is this really happening? Then I was hesitant to call my family because I did not want to get their hopes up, but I did. My mother just started crying and she was so excited, and my dad was ready to jump in the car and come pick me up right then. And I had to explain to him, Daddy, no, it's going to take a little bit of time to process the paperwork. And he said, I don't care if I have to wait in the parking lot. Honestly, until I got in the car with my parents, I was still afraid in the back of my mind that they were going to come out and say, hey, we made a mistake, you need to come back in. Within 2 to 3 weeks of me leaving, they had to set up a quarantine unit for active COVID cases, and they began to put women into that unit. And then the unit became so full that they had to open a second unit. So one unit is 135 women. And if they had to go to a second unit, then that tells me that there were more than 135 positive cases there. And there were only 213 women left at the camp. So you're looking at a disproportionate amount of positives compared to the general population. On the day that I was released, there were several ladies that helped me carry my belongings to receiving and discharge. And one of the ladies, and the image is just so clear in my mind, Saphiria Johnson, she's actually from my hometown. And then I found out that on July 15th, she was hospitalized with COVID. We heard a rumor that she was placed on a ventilator, and we just prayed that it was just that it was a rumor. But as it turns out, it wasn't. And she passed away at the hospital at the age of 36. And now her 2 boys will grow up without a mother, who was in prison for tax fraud. And I don't know what country in the world that tax fraud should turn into a death sentence, but it sure shouldn't be this one.